preocupação. Se nada nunca tem, me nada nunca tem. Pra que tentar magoar? Pra que tão preocupação? Se nada nunca tem, me nada nunca tem. Pra que tentar magoar? A minha é pobre e confortado, camal tallado, camal criado. Já me confortar com minha pobreza. Como me nada nunca tem. A minha é pobre e confortado, camal tallado, camal criado. Já confortar com minha pobreza. Como me nada nunca tem. Me nada nunca tem. Me nada nunca tem. Me nada nunca tem. Para que tentar magoar? Me nada nunca tem. Me nada nunca tem. Me nada nunca tem. Para que tentar odiar?
Hello and welcome everybody. Good morning, midday, afternoon and evening, as we are in different time zones. My name is Katja Löpfe, she, her. I'm the artistic director of Tanzhaus Zurich. I'm wearing a black shirt, have brown hair and a pale skin at the moment as it is raining all the time here in Zurich. We are in the middle of a festival. This is part of it also. Zürich tanzt, it's called. And I would like to thank Cécile and Stefan, who were really supportive in building this event. I'm actually just saying hello to you and hand very quickly over to Rosa Cisneros. Thanks a lot.
Hello everyone, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as this is a very global event. I'm very excited and honored actually to be moderating and holding this space. We have a very beautiful program for us today. I am a woman with olive skin tone. My long black hair is half is up, half is down. I'm wearing a green jumpsuit with green jade necklace. I don't know why. I felt this morning I wanted to wear that. And I have a green earrings and I'm wearing a rouge, like a purple lipstick. So welcome. As this is a online digital space, we're hoping that we can still find a way to connect and to be together and to be body to body. So what that means is we will share. Feel free to use the chat function. You can say hello, say where you're saying hello from. If you want to give a little bit of background of who you are, that'd be great. I'll be monitoring the chats as well as following questions. But also, we are coming from different perspectives, different values, different countries, different languages. So if there is a question or something that's said, we're all here with the intention of learning, of sharing, of being together. So this is a kind and safe space, and there's hopefully a lot of love in the room. So I'm sure we will all, even if we ask or say something that maybe is a little bit clumsy, I think we're here with the best of intention. But please know that no question needs to be perfect. No comment needs to be perfect. This is about the collective and, thinking about how, I love the title of this, You Never Dance Alone. And I think that's something quite beautiful and powerful. My own practice from flamenco Spanish Roma background, I come from a Spanish Roma gypsy community. We say we've been dancing for 150 years. So you come to your space with all of the elders, all of those that came before you, but also honoring the moment. And because of who you are in that moment, you are offering a very specific dance. So I approach today with all of those that came before me, but also with all of you in front of me. So thank you for joining us. And I will just, if we could settle in, we've probably come from a number of different things. If you would just take a moment to take our hands, if you can rub them together, you can go fast or slow. Move the green bottles out of the way, yes. And please feel free to keep your cameras on or off. Children, animals, all of this is a pet family-friendly space. And if you just stop and feel the sensations of your hands, put one hand over your chest, another. You can try to take a really deep, juicy breath. Settle into the space you're in. Maybe observe how you're breathing, what you hear. And as we very gently come out of that, if you would like to just think about your tongue and relax your tongue. And as you relax your tongue, hopefully that settles you into the rest of your body. And I'm very excited to hand over the space to our colleagues, the field. They are three individuals that will be taking us through the next 10 minutes, 10, 11 minutes together. So we invite you to follow the exercise that they will offer us. So over to you, my dear colleagues.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Hi, my name is Lucia. I'm part of the field, but I feel like we can give a more thorough introduction after this little physical exercise that we prepared for you. You can most definitely turn off the video or turn away from the computer just so that you're able to hear me. And I read that someone in the chat says they're driving, so maybe for that person this exercise is not quite safe, but for everybody else you can start to let your eyes travel through the space for a moment. So turn away with your gaze from the screen and start taking in your room, your environment, and look around. And you might be seated, or you might find your way to a standing position, however is more comfortable for you. And in either case, I invite you to plant both of your feet heavily into the floor, like root down through your feet, and let your neck and your head follow the movement of your eyes. And the gaze is not getting caught up by details, but rather just traveling, floating through the space and taking in the information. This is quite a helpful exercise for your central nervous system, calming you down. And I think it's also good for people who sit a lot in front of the computer to challenge the eyes to see things that are really far away. Maybe you have a window close by and you can look out the window and see the thing that is the furthest away from you. And then maybe you take in a microscopic detail of your body, your hand, or a piece of clothing, and switch for a moment back and forth between this really far away space with your eyes and the microscopic details close by. And then keep looking around the room and discover what you haven't maybe so far, things that remained in your background or things that you need to maybe twist a bit to see them. Look over your shoulders or in between your legs or at the ceiling and try and take on a new perspective on your room. And while you do this, make sure that your breath gently flows in and out through your nose. And you register the space without judging it, really. And then I invite you to start a bit of a repetitive movement to look over your right shoulder and then over your left shoulder. So you twist back and forth and you look at the space behind you. And you take in the whole horizon from your right shoulder all the way onto your left-hand side. And you might do this really slow and gentle, or maybe you can increase the speed a bit. If you're standing, your arms might flop from one side to the other and gently touch your back and your kidneys. Or if you're seated, you enjoy your sit bones moving on the chair or on the floor. And we just maintain this movement for a little bit longer, warming up also the core a bit and taking in the information, the visual information of the room, but also all of the other sensorial information of the space that you're in, the sounds, the temperature, the texture of your clothes against your body. Okay, and then we slowly settle this, let go of this movement and find ourselves facing forward again. And in your mind's eye, you visualize your background. You visualize the space that is behind you that you cannot see. And you really try to see it in all its details. You now had the chance to take in this information and see what kind of state. You might know this space really well, or you might not at all. And without checking, just see what details or what aspects of the space that is in your background, that is your blind spot. What is there? And then, depending on your circumstances, either you visualize moving towards that background, or you actually move backwards, slowly, carefully, taking a couple of steps towards what's behind you, or visualizing that you take a couple of steps towards the thing behind you and see it coming closer. So this is really like an exercise for your imagination. And when you arrive, you can turn around or turn and take a different angle and repeat it one more time. And visualize in front of your mind's eye the space that is in your background, behind your back, the things that you don't see, and you move towards them. Great. And maybe we repeat it one more time. So this is really also a way of getting to know the space that we're in and landing here and taking it in until in your own time you find your way back and in front of the computer. But really take your time, there's no rush.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm suddenly quite aware of my physical back, but also this the metaphorical back. And I somehow in watching and being in this two spaces, I felt that there was something quite, you go back to go forward. And so, yeah, I'll just kind of plant that into our conversation. And for those of you that have just arrived, today is a day of being together for the next almost 2 hours. This is a safe space for us, hopefully, that we can move from a place of love, being together as a unit. I will be monitoring the chat, making notes, but please feel free to use the chat to say who you are, where you're coming from, if you have any questions, or you can also, if you don't want to publicly ask the question, you can share that with me privately and I can ask on your behalf. Yes, so I think it makes sense now to bring in our first pair, which is the field, who just guided us through a lovely exercise of awareness and a back exercise, of moving, a spatial awareness exercise, the field, and also Avni. So I will leave it to each of you to present yourselves, and to also say where you're located, because we're in very different locations. So over maybe the field, if you want to start, since you just had the space.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I'll just share my name again. I'm Lucia. I work with the field. Today I'm wearing a green patterned shirt, and I'm white with blonde hair, and I wear my hair tied back.
Yep, I'm Pierre from the field. I'm also wearing green, like full out green outfits. I have also green eyeshadow and everything. You don't really see it. I'm white. I have a mustache. I'm a queer, non-binary person, and I think that's it. French speaking, native, and speaking English with you today. And we are in Zurich. I don't know if you said it. Zurich, Switzerland.
My name's Declan. I'm part of the field as well. Today I'm wearing a navy blue jumper with some stripes down the middle, and I have short brown hair and blue eyes and white skin. Should we pass over to you, to Avni?
Hello, I'm Avni. I'm speaking to you from New Delhi at the moment, although this is not where I live. I live in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in India. Yeah, and I have hair tied up, which often falls out open, so I might be wearing it up and down through this conversation. And I'm wearing red lips, and I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I'm sitting on a table in a small hostel room and speaking to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think there's we clearly have the green and the blue theme happening here today. But joking aside, I think there's something quite special about having a collective. And maybe if the field, if you want to tell us a little bit about your work as a collective and what you're doing in Zurich, but also as individuals, because it's the individuals that are part of this collective. So we don't want to lose sight of that either. And then we have Avni, who is today here as an individual also working, but in previous conversations, there was lots of crossover in terms of working. So yes, the field, if you would like to share a bit.
Yeah, so as you said, we're a collective and we've been working together since 2019. We work in Zurich, and our kind of home base is the Tanzhaus in Zurich as well. we work with many kind of different things around dance. So that could be traditional stage performances, but one of our biggest focuses or wishes is to place emphasis on non-product oriented work around dance. So a few examples of those could be the Dance for Parkinson's class that we are initiating, which is a. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. I can take over for that because it's been a bit my baby since the beginning. It's a dance class. It initially started with dance for people affected by Parkinson's disease, but it's now growing and we're opening it up for people who have neuro challenges like MS, but it could also be a stroke patients and their families and friends and maybe caretakers. And it's another also example of the field's work, I would say, where we might have an idea, but it's not that we are like ourselves organizing it, but we try to really build bridges and connect the different artists and institutions of Zurich. And in this example, it's now with the Opera House and the Tonhalle, so two quite renowned institutions that I could convince to take this program on board and get it started. And this will finally happen very soon. Another example for that kind of non-product oriented work is maybe classes that we teach, which are not like dance training necessarily, but really more, we're thinking of formats of other benefits that we feel dance can enlighten or we can share through dance. And often, for example, we are interested to read texts, but we also feel this need to digest texts through the physical body. And so we thought up a format that is called textual fantasy, which we will hold one tonight actually, where we gather and we read a text, and it might be simple or poetic texts or fiction, but it might also be maybe texts that are a bit more challenging or academic. And we feel like through sharing these texts and reading them together and trying to understand them together and then combining them with a physical practice, that allows us to sort of meet information in a different way. So that's also, and these formats are all always we try to make them as open as possible and yeah. Or Pierre, do you want to add anything?
I think I'm good.
Then I'll pass it on to Avni maybe.
Yeah, lovely.
So I've, I think the last 10 years of my work has been around building museums, and a museum called the Conflictorium. It's a museum of conflict in Ahmedabad and in Raipur, Chhattisgarh, which is in central India. This sort of museum really began as to respond to two parallel questions. One is, what are the kind of spaces we can hold to talk about things that are difficult, that don't sit very easily with us. And the other was, what kind of institutions and infrastructures within the art spaces do we imagine for ourselves? And really the idea of thinking through the museum was to, in a sense, upturn the very weight that a museum carries. So as much as it was about what is inside the museum, or how it was also about how do we walk in a museum, or what are the lexicons and languages of a museum. And really that's been part of the last 10 years of my work. But I've also led a sort of parallel, almost secret life as a dancer for about 20 years now. and it has taken some amount of negotiating of marrying these two worlds to each other, that of the museum and that of performance, where I actually don't think that they're exclusive, mutually exclusive at all. I think they are certainly influenced and they are certainly in conversation with each other, because both in space, in physical space, one is deploying breath, and so is the performing body, or the body just as is. So I feel like I'm also now, like Rosa said earlier, I'm here as an individual because I'm also transitioning out of my museum role to transition into a full-time performer now. So that's where I am.
So it's quite, if we think about, I think the field had a question for you earlier around the kind of conflict and consensus. And, if we're thinking about these two parts of whether that's working in a museum or working in a collective, how as dance makers are you sitting with conflict and consensus? Do you need these two to somehow find the way forward? And you're working in the conflict museum, which is energy in a very specific way and objects. So I suppose that the question might be maybe starting with you, Avni, and then we can go to the field. How have you navigated conflict and consensus in your world, both in the museum but also as the dancer? It's a big question, I know.
Yeah. Being, I guess conflict becomes the underlying state of, it is the underlying state of the world and the body's experience as it navigates the world. Unfortunately, in how environments are shaping us, or how society and education demands bodies to formulate themselves in ways that are running so far away uh, uh, from the body, or actually not be looking inwards at all, but to be looking outwards. And so that's also where I feel the potential of objects to actually produce material worlds, to be able to produce some conversation that can facilitate sort of a world that is more internal. And it's a strange kind of thing, that if you can't just go from inside to out, then maybe there's still a possibility to go outside in. And I know, because on one hand one speaks of conflict and completely being cognizant that the forms and repercussions of conflict in the world show up in the forms of grave violence. But I'm also interested in how do we locate conflict within the self. Yeah.
Thank you. And from that answer, there was another question about in out, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So the field, do you want to respond? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we were really interested in Avni's work in having this museum where conflict is really brought to the fore, and it's the subject matter of the work, because we had the feeling that, especially when we formed as a collective, a lot of our work was actually about conflict reduction, or finding ways to come to consensus, or to deal with ways that you don't come into conflict so often, and to flatten that. So it was really interesting for us to know that Avni, you're working very explicitly with showing conflict. And we had a conversation earlier about, does that say something about the context we also live in? We're also in Switzerland, which has a kind of is a famously neutral place, and we wonder how that also filters down into the working patterns and this kind of stuff. So a lot of stuff was bubbling up for us from that.
And maybe to add, and on another level, like there's this level of conflict in our way of working together and communicating, but then there's also conflict as a tool for creating, and especially to create drama, which is at the end of the day what we're also interested in when we're on stage, right? And with one of the choreographers that we worked with, her name's Isabel Lewis, and we actually also worked with her in a museum for a long time, and we brought our dance to a museum for a couple of weeks. And she had this set of rules for an group improvisation practice, and one of the rules that kind of to me talks about this topic is that we will be civil but we will not be polite. And I think that's quite interesting, that because friction kind of also generates life force, and it also generates interesting scenarios and dynamics somehow. So where do we allow the conflict to kind of inspire us, and where is it in fact hindering or negative?
And for both of you, you mentioned that this idea of the objects, and for the field you were saying these textual fantasies, the text kind of inspiring or being, and then digesting that in some way through the body. And you, Avni, were saying that the objects sometimes are away from being outside to going inside. And so for either of you, are those objects conflict kind of are you reading texts that are very much looking at conflict? And if so, how does that work when you're, talk me through a little bit that going into the body with the literary text. That's, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that we are talking about conflict, because today's textual fantasy is centered about the force of nonviolence from Judith Butler. And so it's definitely talking about the distinction between violence and aggression, and pacifism and violence in a way. And I mean, it's a very interesting book. I chose it myself to also share it today with the people who will come. And she's mentioning this thing of this distinction between you can be pacifist or non-violent, but still do this with a lot of aggression, and aggressively non-violent. And I really think that this idea in today's world is kind of important to portray. And when reading these things, then today, for example, when we're going to read the book, what came to my mind actually is a martial art practice that I did for like 3 years, kind of regularly. And I was thinking about how to go into the body from this text, which is very loaded, and how to feel empowered after this read. And I feel that martial arts is a very empowering practice in a way that you can be aggressive and you can defend yourself and you can have power within your own body. And at the same time, it's a lot about resilience. So I felt that it's really connecting to this idea of conflict in a way, but it's not always. But then to go physically with it, I think it's rather kind of, in that case, going from the object to the body is kind of instinctive in a way, or like believing in the fact that it's infusing the body, the knowledge that the things that you're reading or discussing are infusing the body and are going through your movements, even though you think about it or not. And I think that's a bit how we approach it in general, not being like, I connect this sentence with this physical practice, but more the essence of it is infusing my body and my work and who I am, like with every image we see and with every action we do. So it's a bit like believing in the fact that if you repeat a similar action every day, it's going to become who you are. Or if you, or like this, or as a dancer as well, if you perform a piece long enough about violence, there is a potential for you to become violent as well, because you perform this thing. So performing it, you become it in a way. I strongly believe in that as well. So maybe if we perform something a bit less conflictual or a bit more oriented towards vulnerability, then we are becoming more of this. That's kind of my hope also, or I think our hope for dance and movement in general, bringing dance and movement to people so they can have more empathy for themselves and each other. And if you practice this long enough, maybe it's gonna become a reality, or this utopia is becoming a reality.
And it'll have a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, just as an extension of that idea, I'm really interested in, you know, how collectives come together and how how do they find each other, and so I'm probably also asking a specific question on how did this collective come together, and in particular maybe the impulse of sameness or difference, you know. Do collectives come together because they are like-minded and because the individuals within the collective are thinking similarly, or foundationally are they because they think so differently that they become collectives?
I can start about how we came together. It's maybe a rather unusual situation for a collective, but we all attended an audition. There was the field was a project which was initiated by a few different partners in Zurich, kind of out of a wish for there to be a group who could work long term. So we actually didn't know each other before this audition. And then there was an audition held, and we somehow formed a group at the end of this audition, which is, yeah, as I said, maybe a not so common situation for a collective. And yeah, maybe as I mentioned before, then the beginning period was really a lot of work about how to learn to understand each other, or learn to understand the sameness, but also the difference, and how we could work together, basically, like very concretely how to work together.
I would say also there comes a lot of, many assumptions come up when we met each other, and we assumed sort of a sameness because of our generation or because of a similar dance training, and then yet already through like the language barrier sometimes, or the fact that we were brought up in different countries somehow, there were these little glitches almost of when we assume we're talking about the same thing, but then we realize we're really not. And this is also, I guess, when conflict then comes into place. So, and then yet at the same time, I think the sameness also helped us in certain situations when we were confronted with or challenged with what we're doing, and we could build a kind of a union and stand together behind a certain viewpoint, sort of. So
you had, yeah, sorry. You had also mentioned in this in our exchange before about additions and subtractions also.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a kind of core group, but we also give a lot of space to be porous and for people to pass through the collective and stay for a while and then go away and come back and da-da-dum. So this kind of idea of sameness is also in fluctuation sometimes as well. It's not a concrete element.
So we have a few more minutes left before this part wraps up, but I do have, and maybe it's a big question, but if you could keep it to just 1.5 minutes each, that'd be great. But we have been talking about conflict and also, you know, navigating this in our different contexts. And I think what's quite interesting to get a sense of is funding, and how funding sits for each of you in your context, whether as an individual or as a collective or as individuals in the collective. So I don't know if you can spend a couple minutes each, maybe. discussing that, your reality in relation to funding, and how you hold on to values or when you compromise and how that's negotiated. Because I think we're all compromising at different points in different ways. So yeah, Avni, would you like to start us off maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like capturing the animal by its teeth. Really, I don't even want to think of resources simply as funding. I feel like they are fundamentally insidious in how infrastructures are formed and articulated. And if I talk of sort of the context of India, where funding in the arts is a specific kind of ecosystem. Funding is limited. There is the possibility of state funding and funding either from large corporations or funding from crowd funds or funding from foreign aid organizations. And these are really the three key kinds of fundings that become available, or if people are self-funding their own work and therefore actually running full-time jobs and sort of supporting their artistic practice. So I would say that these are examples. But all of these, and each one of these options are they are mired in sort of complete inaccessibility. So if just how do you navigate these worlds of funding? They're also incestuous. They're also sort of significantly closed doors. This whole idea of sort of merit plays a really sort of important, a kind of a role that marks out relationships. So if there are performers or artists who have been funded by one organization, they will be funded by the second and the third and the fourth. And therefore you require this kind of prior merit. And that prior merit becomes available if there is sameness, unfortunately. Prior merit is not available if there's prior difference. So in that sense, the kind of work that gets produced will always have to be in some form or the other. And there's a lot of conversation around doing protest-based work or work that sort of challenges status quo. And I also I'm sort of mindful of reading this kind of work, or being very congratulatory towards this kind of work that finds funding sometimes, because we also have a problem of palatable anger, that there are certain sections of our society that can produce anger for someone else and therefore produce highly aestheticized anger that is very easy to digest. But there's also non-palatable anger, which is so complex and it comes from lived experience. It either funding projects like that initial responses can range from anything like they don't listen, to it's too political, to we'll get into trouble, meaning that the range of disassociating with that kind of work could be any. So it is a sort of vortex, sort of churning itself, eating its own tail.
Thank you. Thank you, Avni. And the field, do you have any final thoughts on this very big question I've asked?
Avni, and we had an exchange with Avni before, and Avni asked us how we continue to dance in a kind of world where people are tired out from the situation, and how do we dance for care or repair, which I thought was a super nice question. And it kind of pointed us back to a text which we often return to, which is The Fantastic Institution from Sarah Vanhi. And in it, she talks about the kind of, that people are too tired to approach these huge institutions and walk up their fancy stairs and enter these grand halls, and that they somehow don't reflect the situation out there. And then she proposes that what if we, instead of, climbing up these grand stairs, could fall down into holes and hang out in these holes and make friends and, I don't know, drink tea or whatever. And it makes me think that that was a big wish of ours in the field, that we could make spaces for these kind of non-events or non-products and long-term and maybe nothing, but maybe something. And yeah, we've also found that we sometimes haven't always had the possibility to, right?
I mean, this sounds so exciting, but in reality, at least in Zurich, it is extremely difficult to fund non-product oriented formats. I think also in there we talk about conformity and neutrality, and this Swiss system of maybe also really high expectations, because we've been producing works on such a high level and there's such high expectations, and there's not many cracks and there's not many imperfections, but there's this sleek sort of like high production value. And and exactly, it was the palatable and the accessible in terms of like, it's easy to digest sort of, and the things that are there's just less fame or less people celebrate, I would say, the funding systems celebrate these imperfections way too little. This is my very personal opinion, that the cracks and that the holes and the challenging and that this gets also celebrated sort of, and I lost the thread.
Yeah. Thank you. I will have to close this chapter of our session, but you leave us on a really powerful note of, celebrating the cracks, and I think that there's something quite powerful about that in the work we're doing. And so, thank you both, both groups, Three, the Field, and Avni, for that conversation. We'll have a quick moment I'll do a little exercise with us, and for 3-4 minutes, and then we'll move into the second group. So if we could just take a moment and look at our hands. If you want to just take a moment, look at your hands, maybe make a fist, turn your wrists around, look at the cracks on your hands. You might have observed that your nails, your palms of your hands, the top of your hands might have very specific imprints. If you want to think of a memory of your hands that are very specific to your hands, or, if you're thinking about your dance practice, is there anything that comes to mind as you feel? Maybe you want to smell your hands. If you just make a little fist and just rotate, dita, ba, dita, diki, ba, dita, ba, dita, di, 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 ba, dita, ba, dita, ba, dita, da, da, reverse, dika, diki, ba, biba, diki, ba, dika, diki, ba, di, 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 ba, di, da, da, di, da, da, dika, da. And now take one hand up to your eye and do the same rotation of the one of the other arm. And just observe what that looks like and feels like now. And reverse ta, tika, piki, pipa, tika, ta, tika, ta, tika, ta. And reverse the other hand. Ipa, tika. You might want to open your fingers this time. Tita, ta, tita, ti, 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 ti. Now both. Maybe they are going opposites of one another. Yes. Maybe you move them around. Maybe we started with kind of observing our back. What sounds, what cracks are they making? Wonderful. Ole, all of these beautiful hands, flamencos in the space. Beautiful. So I would like to invite, thank you for joining me on that exercise, exploration. I would like to invite Omar and Ergao to join the space.
Hello.
Omar, hello Omar, hello
Hi.
Ergao, hello. Thank you. So for the next 25, 30 minutes, we will be together now having a conversation with this group. But please, for those of you that have joined the space, feel free to use the chat. Feel free to have your cameras on or off. Tell us where you're coming from. If you have a question you want to ask that you perhaps don't know how to ask, you're welcome to share that with me and I can ask on your behalf anonymously. But this is our space. We're moving from a place of love, of kindness, and exploration. And as we are in a global, very global hybrid situation now, I'm very happy that I can introduce Omar, who is in Lebanon. So Omar, over to you.
So first of all, thank you very much for this lovely time and for the presentation of Avni and the field. It was so much inspiring. And this encounter in itself is very, very inspiring for me at least. So Erga, should I continue? Would you like to start? Also present yourself?
Better you go first.
So I'm Omar. I'm a part of a theater collective called Zukak. We are based in Beirut. Our theater collective have started now 17 years ago when we were all just graduating from the university. Theater in Lebanon is not considered as a serious profession. So our first need to work as a collective was in order to be able to create a community of theater, of people that do consider theater as a profession, as something that you really want to do in life and not as a hobby. So it was a way for us also to protect ourselves artistically and professionally from our context. So it started like that. We wanted to become like any theater company that could be living anywhere on the planet in Occident, maybe doing nice performances and touring the world maybe, or at least touring the country. But very fastly, this naivety, people used to call it naivety, was confronted to the reality of the place we are living in. And we understood that we cannot, in this country, not build our microcosm in which we want to grow up. If we want to do theater in the way that we consider it, like non-commercial, a real encounter with people, a non-productive profession, for example, we needed to create the whole microcosm of in which we will grow up. We understood that we needed a space because there is no public spaces in Lebanon. There is no theater that will host you without not having your wallet full of money. there is no audience yet for the kind of theater that you want to produce. So we decided that instead of leaving the country, we're going to create all that here. That way, we created a space. We created projects. Those projects brought audience because those projects were festivals. We created a performing art festival. We created programs to transmit our knowledge that we built throughout the years. We went to communities in order to show them our process of work. Even our own productions are based on people's stories. Most of our productions are based on collecting stories from different communities, from women, from women subject to domestic violence, from all the refugees that came to Lebanon. And in that way, we were able to create a community that is kind of hosting us. It's like the product of our work at the end of the day hosted us. And that way, we understood that opening up to your context and opening up the door of your body and the door of your mind to other persons protects you more than bunkers. Why am I saying this? Because in the last 3-4 years, what we faced in Lebanon was destroyed a lot of initiative in Lebanon and destroyed a lot of people and persons. I'm not speaking only physically, but I'm speaking also psychologically. A lot of artists and initiative left the country. And what protected us, actually, even though our walls were destroyed by the explosion, that community of people that was making a country for us, not only for our profession. And this is how now, after everything we went through, and our work, artistic work and community work and organization work, because our company is also 18 employees and more than 70 direct beneficiary of the space and of our programs, cyclically. And we understood that the actual work of art we are seeking is not only the process of work on a certain performance, but the whole organism and this whole, how we say, the whole way we connect, the whole body we build around our community. For example, what do you put in a festival that is not related only to the quality of the art of it, but it's also the people that you are lining up next to each other that are representing something that is bigger than you and bigger than the work of art, the product in itself. How do we create communities in order to create public spaces that are lacking in so many countries? And this year, I think with Erga we meet, because when we spoke, you were speaking about how to create a public space, physically and non-physically. How to create your own world and your own country that the only purpose of it is to destroy your words. And so this is how we kind of nowadays blurred the lines between a festival, trainings, communities, a performance. So for us, everything, even family life, enters in this blurriness and creates a kind of landscape that not only you can look at, but you can feel it, and you can sense it, and you can experience it, and that is takes you far than a simple. I'm not diminishing a performance, but let's say call it a simple performance that you can put in your luggage and take it from one theater to another. And in this way, we for us, it's not anymore about performing art. It's about our own small planets, if you want, that open up many other people and initiatives like the ones that you are hearing about, or the ones that you people take part of it. When we meet the small object, small organism kind of get bigger and bigger, sometimes bigger than the planet itself. I hope it wasn't too poetic and it's kind of clear.
Not at all. It was quite beautiful. This, I don't know, I suddenly had a visual of a solar system and kind of planets and galaxies, and somehow we're interconnected in some way. So I really thank you for that. And Edgar, do you want to introduce
Yeah,
yourself, where you are as well, and a little
yeah,
bit about your work?
yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Argao. My dance team called Argao Dance Production, which is dance production. We own this space since 10 years ago. So we're running this dance studio like almost 10 years. So we have 30 adult team member. Okay, do you hear the echo is quite a lot? No, it's okay. Good. Yeah, we have 30 member. We dance together. Someone has a dance training background. Someone is non. They have different ages. Yeah, and we have a kid dance team from 8 years old to 12 years old. So we all combine together. And because pandemic, like now is post-pandemic, we are looking for some artistic way. What is the new way for us? We are more thinking about this question because in China. Oh, I forgot to introduce. We are based in south of China. Guangzhou is next to Hong Kong, and I was studying in Hong Kong. And after the school, I moved to Guangzhou, and we are starting the dance production. Okay, continue the terms because in China, like every policy or financial things or artistic is all from Beijing as capital. So from the capital influence to another city, like second city, third city. So we have follow what they want us to follow. And but now as a southern people, we are thinking what is southern of China, and what is our neighbor do something, a ceremony or the what we believe, we must have something similar. So that's why we ask for friends like from Thailand, from Taiwan, from Hong Kong, or or Fujian. Like, so we are try to looking for some movement very similar to our life, from the ceremony, from the ritual, from daily life. And then we all practice with our dance team, like 30 person, and we try to understand what the movement is. Or like we have one woman, she's retired, so some some daily life movements, it makes her to memorize her childhood. I think this generation gap is super nice for us because like 90s or 2000 born young people, we have the really generation gap, or I could say we don't know what is the background behind us. So this is what we are doing in of series. Even our series work we just finished in Hong Kong called Butterfly Island. We also use this concept like we have A dancers or actors. We create our own island, but we are talking, if we have island, we must have ocean. But what ocean means to individually to you. So we do the research, and we also interview, like collect those material as archive. Now our next further is like we already have this model as performance, and then we will going to perform in the village. We perform in the city village, which is like poor people living that neighborhood. So we do the workshop to recreate that production, that performance. And even we will be invite the neighborhood to perform with us, or tell their own story about immigration or migration story, like something like that. And our community, I think community is super important in China, as it's very similar what Omar said. We don't have real public space, you know. So we create a public. The public, even our studio, for everybody dancing, but they pay the rent. We all together pay the rent, like school fee, but actually they are charity. We are all supporting this space. We have space can stay for a while, for dance, for conversation. Because I remember during the pandemic time, we locked down. We cannot do anything, but we pay the rent every month. And our team members still to support us to keep this space alive. So this is also our thinking, like what dance issue in China, in Guangzhou, generally. So we bring everybody together, like celebration. If we dance together, that the dance should be like celebration, like ceremony, to celebrate something for us. And for for another, the last thing is, unfortunately, our owner will put the rent triple, more than double. So we will be close this place in September. Okay. So few months later, we will close this place. I'm happy to close my career because as like pandemic, it's the good timing to think about what is my next 10 year, what I want to do, what is the dance issue for for me, for the society, and also how to bring people. If we talk about community, what is community is in Guangzhou, and yeah, something like that.
Thank you, Edgar. That was actually the question I had for both of you. How would you describe your dance communities in your context? Because both of you have mentioned you have an organism. Maybe it's around building audiences, but also around people and making sure the people and the stories are there. And, you know, Edgar, you said that there's a generation gap, but you're bringing people together. So if, maybe you can start and then Omar, but what is your dance community like for, yeah, in Guangzhou?
Oh, okay.
You could show me as well if you want.
Okay. Okay. Now it's like 10:45 p.m. So people just left
Yeah,
after dance classes.
yeah.
And my colleague, my producer and my colleague, Dian Dian, they still stay here. They are in the Zoom also for listening. I think it's the good way is to make together, like everyone makes together, like disabled friends, the kids, the mother, sometimes bring the father, and the retire friends, student. We all together to dance, to do the movement research, to share the memory of something like different topics. So I think from the sharing is connected, something we're missing, or we like the topic empathy. We try to understanding different age, different experience, different environment. Yeah.
Thank
This
you.
what we used to do. And also our performance, we invite the disabled friends. They sometimes they perform, sometimes they just audience. So I really happy to introduce them to the kids, because in China, just for um, um, imagination for you, because in outdoor, we are not seeing that much disabled people, because the resource is not enough to protect them. Even they want to go somewhere to call the taxi, the taxi driver will refuse them. Yeah, it is not that friendly, but we hope dance or performance or in this community we support each other, and we hang out more in the outdoor, like people see, oh, yeah, you can be my friend. I don't mind.
Oh, that's very sweet. And, you know, this idea of empathy that clearly, you know, you spoke of. But, you know, I think, Omar, your work is also very much about people and empathy and kindness. So do you want to tell us what your dance community organism looks like, feels like?
Even though we're a theater company, and it's a lot about theater and what we do. Edgar spoke about celebration. Our space is not just about coming and experiencing theater or performing art or working, but it's also, we try also to create a space of celebration. This is why we also open our theater for parties. We do a lot of parties, and we think celebrating together, just the fact of being together and anyone dancing like he wants and just celebrating, create that moment in the community that is like we were doing flamenco at some point. At that moment of trance and flamenco, the El Duende, where it's that moment of trance. And when you experience it, when you experience this in a party where there is hundreds of persons coming to that space just because that space is open and safe for marginalized communities, people from the queer communities, people from the migrant communities, people from all social classes that come suddenly and see that art is able to create a community that hold them in a country that do not recognize them. And we are all one body in the same space, just celebrating, could be dancing, could be just drinking, could be just standing, could just wanting to be here for no reason. For us, it's that moment of trance that create the community, that create the art, that creates a reason why we do a performance before that party, or why we wake up in the morning to work on Shakespeare maybe, because we know to that performance will come people that came to the party because they say this is the community of performing art and arts that are creating this space that is safe for me to dance in it and to celebrate in it. So I want to enter this microcosm. And the bigger the parties, the bigger the microcosm gets. And yes, this is how we like to celebrate our community, to make it bigger. But of course, next to that, because there is a question that came to the chat, is it a physical or from the field? Is it a physical space or are we nomadic? We are nomadic by nature because we still go toward the communities in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Serbia, in France, in Calais, in the UK, in Berlin, in all the camps of Lebanon, to work with the communities, work with women subject to domestic violence, we work in prisons. But later on, those communities, this nomadic, every nomad at some point comes back to his oasis. For us, our walls are kind of oasis in the middle of this chaos, at least for us. And the community comes to that oasis from everywhere we went randomly, nomadically.
Thank you, Omar. And Ergao, do you have any thoughts about how your community, dance community, celebrates? You talked a bit about ritual and ceremony. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the dance rituals that you do, or that you're in your dance studio, maybe?
Okay. At this moment, we are researching a dance, because my question is like, southern of China, do we have dance? like yeah. In my experience, I don't see dance. I learned dance. I learned dance from somewhere, like Tibet, or modern dance from Mafraguem, like from UK, or Laban, or we copy all the dance sequence or dance style. And so now we are asked ourselves, what is dance as Chinese who grow up in Southern? At this moment, we are learning a ceremony from Chaozhou. Yeah, it's in Guangdong province. But this dance sequence, you can see in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in Thailand, Chinese community, they also keep this tradition, but different shape. Yeah. So we now we learn, we try to copy, and we are going to invite a teacher, a master to teach us and share the article lecture for us. So this is the very beginning, because during the pandemic, when we locked down, I only watched the TikTok for 3 years to learn this kind of dance, and we try to, as a dancer, to understand, oh, this movement should be like this, and how to teach for our members. They can learn either, and we practice together. But this summer, we will invite a master to generally to learn.
That's fantastic. And, there's something very powerful also about, you know, oftentimes within the dance world, it's a very Eurocentric, very Western way of learn ballet, learn contemporary. You go to very specific people, but saying, well, okay, that's there, but I want to know, well, what is the dance of the Sultan of China? What is, kind of going back to your own roots in culture? I think that's really beautiful and challenging the usual ways that I think we think about dance and passing on dance technique.
Yeah. I think I am not the positive image as a dance artist in China. So the master say they thought I am the exotic people.
Okay.
Like a few years ago, before the pandemic, I have a CV work called discoteca, because we look back to 80s, when the Western dance culture, pop culture, influence from Hong Kong to mainland. So everybody dance. I think that is very modern dance. Like disco is modern dance for me. And so the work is about disco, Chinese disco. But the master, they, I think they probably not like it. But young people like it. Everybody dance.
Yeah.
So at this moment, I would like to keep the role frame, just to learn, to do a lot of research and archive to keep. What we're going to be look like, I'm not sure now, because in this kind of celebration ceremony, it's going to be very commercial at the moment, because our government now to 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 teach us like keep the tradition. So something tradition, before we used to ignore them, but now we use them to to pay them to dance for, for the opening, for something. So it's very make me upset to see that, because it's totally wrong way. It's wrong, and people just for fun or for entertainment to see this spiritual dance. So but I was visit in a small village. I saw them practice in the daily. Wow, I was crying. It's super powerful, impact my whole body, because they just like smoking, wear the slipper, wear the take off the clothes. Men and female, they're very aggressive. They say something fucking you, but when they hear the drums, everybody like boom. It's very performance, performative. It's alive. So at this moment, I'm not sure, is it the original version? I just like, if as you see, some performance like Tai Chi with modern dance, that's awful for me. I don't want to be that kind of artist. So I expect them. So I try to understand them, and then maybe the master will tell me what I need to concern, what I need to be careful. So yeah, this is my beginning.
Thank you, Ergao. Thank you. And we're coming to a close of this group, but we agreed that if you wanted to, and if internet allowed, that you would share your space or show or think of a memory of your spaces. So I don't know, Omar, if you wanted to share your, I don't know, your office or take us to the space, but think about a memory of being in that space. Yes. So over to you, Omar. Maybe if you unmute. I don't know if you're... Yes, thank you.
So I'm going out of this office. So those are our new walls that before the explosion, they fell during the explosion, and we replaced them with plastic walls that are movable so that we can create private and semi-private spaces. This is our main hall where we organize the parties. It could fit almost 500 to 600 persons at the same time. Before the explosion, the space was very dodgy and the light couldn't enter, but the architect decided that during the renovation, he would let the light enter the space in order to, like a healing process somehow. This is Valerie, she's premiering tomorrow night. No, after tomorrow. And her rehearsals are inside, so we cannot enter. And another wall that can be movable. And here are the backstage of the theater, and Mehdi, our stage manager. Hello. Hi.
Hello. Very important role as stage manager. Yes. Yes, fantastic. I don't know if we've lost you, Omar, but
there used to be a wall that so fell.
I think we're starting to lose Omar, but if you can hear me, it's very poetic to we've been talking about conflict and repair in the first group, and with the second group, we've been looking at organisms and bodies and community, and when you said yes.
Oh, I'm back where the Wi-Fi is better.
Okay. No, I was just saying, Omar, it's very poetic to, see this space, and as you talking about before the explosions, after the explosions, and then to see that, the new space now allows for light and for, so from something that obviously is very powerful and quite conflict oriented, and you've created and transformed that into something quite beautiful that allows for celebration, that allows for your community, the organism, to be. So thank you. And Ergao, I know that you were showing us your space. If you want to take us back through yours.
I guide you guys to have a little tour of my space. Our cat is
always good to have a cat in the space. Yes.
Yeah, we used to dance. We are dancing on this dance floor.
Mm-hmm.
But Actually, I want to show the toilet for you, because for me it's very important to tell the story. You know, Chinese toilet usually is awful. and the studio, we spent 2 years at least to let people discipline, like after toilet, please spring spring some perfume, be clean for the next. This is my my job first. And I think it's most important than dance. And the second floor, I how to say, the young artists can apply here as residency. So the painter, he left a word for us.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you.
Yeah, this is thick.
Thank you. And
okay, so you can see my color.
yes. So thank you both for sharing, for offering and explaining what celebration and community means in both of your spaces. And also for sharing your physical space with us. It's, you know, rare that I think we get to see different studios. So it was very beautiful to see where the magic and the stress and the conflict, but also the beauty happens. So thank you. I want to now we'll semi-close this chapter. So if anyone wants to come and say anything in the final section of our conversation and time together, I now want to introduce Yana, who's in Brazil and who can also theater and performance group. So if Yana, if you could introduce yourself. Unfortunately, our dear Golf cannot join us today. They were supposed to be the third partner, but they can't join us. So Yana, if you could give us a little bit, and then we'll loop the field back in to kind of help close the session. So over to you, please.
Hello, everyone. Well, as I said, my name is Yana. I'm from Trovoa, which is not a dance collective. I'd like to correct this. We are not a collective, actually, and we are not from São Paulo. Also, we are articulation, a national articulation of local collectives. So Trovoa means thunderstorm, and it began in 2017 with 4 artists from Rio de Janeiro that received the funding for art residency, and they decided to share their practice with other racialized artists. And during an event called Chás de Verão, which means summer tea, which was basically a meeting place for artists, for racialized artists to meet each other, to chat a little bit. And one of the demands that came from this meeting was a necessity, a need to articulate ourselves in a national way, so we could be inserted in the traditional art circuit. Since in Brazil, I guess it's the same in the whole world, non-hegemonic bodies are usually out of the hegemonic art circuit. So we are diverse And I forgot to say about myself. I'm a brown woman. I'm wearing a seed necklace, which is sacred for my religion. And I have in my background some indigenous arts. I'm a painter, actually. I paint with natural pigments, which I do myself at my home. And most of our artists are Black or brown, cis women, but we have also indigenous and Asian, Brazilian, and trans people in our collective, in our art collection. And I'm from Pernambuco, which is in the northeast of Brazil. I'm speaking from the countryside of Brazil right now. So as you see, we are really a large group. We are like more than 500 people in the articulation. So the big thing about this presentation here is that really hard for any one of us to speak in the behalf of the whole group. We are diverse and we are independent collectives that work together to get inserted in the art circuit. The first action we took was Levante Nacional Travoa, which in English means Travoa National Uprising. We did a series of simultaneously exhibitions that happened with different art supports. Some of us are painters, some of us are performers, dancers, and some of us work with theater as well. So we are really diverse. And this uprising happened in 2019 and was the thing that was like the spot that we started to be an articulation. Before it was a small collective from Rio, and then after that we became a national articulation. So Travoa is from Brazil, it's in general. We are present in 4 of the 5 regions of Brazil. And so about that, our collective practice is more that place of boosting our careers for each other, in an independent way. This uprising that happened in 2019 was all self-organized and self-funded. So we did what we could, that means that some of our artists couldn't frame their artwork for the exhibition, but it happened, and we got what we wanted to show up ourselves. It was like a way for us to shout loud that we exist, that we want to be in the art circuit. And at the beginning, that action that took place in the middle of 2019, we were able to do that with the support of some partners and independent art places that helped us to make this happen. But the hegemonic art circuit was not understanding what was happening. So actually we got more attention and was able to participate of some important art fairs like SP Art in the next years. Last year, for example, we took part of it. Was the first SP Art after pandemic, so we took part of it in person. And I had the luck to have one of my paintings there. And so what else? Most of the artists that are part of Travoa were more local artists that worked, with traditional culture of their communities. And we have a very diverse culture in Brazil, as you can imagine. It's a huge country, so we have a really diverse way of expressing our art. But most of us was like in shadows before that, and after the uprising, we could just do stuff like being here, for example. You know, for me, it's a big thing to be here and chatting with you guys. Because in Brazil, the art circuit is centered in São Paulo and Rio mostly. So we that are from other parts of Brazil, we used to have a very hard time to get to be part of those actions, of those art fairs and so on. And now we articulate online. So if I would show the Travoas space, I would show our WhatsApp group, actually, because it's where we articulate, it's where we work together. And that's where we put things to see who can do. You know, this action, for example, was placed in our group, and we like discussed who would be like here, you know, and the things that we take in count to choose an artist to take part of an action or another is mostly how this artist could be or not without Travoa in this action, you know. For example, as PR, some of our Travoas, that's how we call ourselves, some of our Travoas are represented by art galleries, for example. So for taking part in SPR, one of the things we thought is that, well, you must be not represented by an art gallery to take part of it. It's so it's kind of a social movement, you know, kind of it's an articulation, actually. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. So there's a lot there that, you know, I think we could, with everyone, but especially what you're saying, that, you know, that it's in a way a movement in how you're organizing, you're self-funding. But if you could talk me a little bit through what's some of that criteria is to be, so does someone join? Who do they contact? So how does that work? That, and yeah, and someone is always, or a group of people are always managing, you know, that WhatsApp or bringing people together. So can you talk us through that a little bit?
Since we are really an articulation of local independent collectives, it's up to the local collectives to choose who is going to be part of Travoa, you know. So it's something that happens very organically. In the beginning, I guess we were not more than 100, and now we are like 500. So but the criteria that I guess I can say about my collective that is from Pernambuco is that we are really open. The artists that wants to join us, they must be doing art, you know, they must be active with their activities. And mainly, I guess, artists that couldn't reach the art circuit without us, you know. So peripheric people, you know, people from that doesn't have many contacts or many heritage money, you know, we prioritize those.
Yes. And do you have different ages? So are there generational kind of aspects you have to navigate in this? Yeah, if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're mostly like in the 20s and 30s, but we have some younger and some older artists taking part of that too. But in general, it's more a young collective, I guess.
Yeah, and you know, 500 people is a lot of people. And is there moments when you all can come together, or kind of various regions? No, that doesn't.
No, it's really hard. I don't know all the girls, you know.
Okay.
I don't know. I myself, I didn't take part of all the actions that Travoa did. I took part of the uprising in 2019, and I went to the SPR last year. but we don't join. I like, we would love to. That's something that we want to do. Since we were a collective that was founded during the pandemics, basically, we didn't have the chance yet to have a national meeting. You know, that's something that we want to, but it's a lot of organization, it's a lot of funding that we didn't manage to do yet. So actually, the managing is really local. It's self-organized by each local collective. We don't have like an owner, you know, we don't have a president or anything. It's all self-organized and it's really horizontal, like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes, this is what I was going to say. You're really, it sounds grassroots and that kind of horizontal, not the top down or and at this point maybe it makes sense to bring in the field again, who is a collective, also very diverse, but in a very different way. Is there anything that you've heard or that maybe you want to ask Jana about the differences and or advice? I don't know, there's something I think quite beautiful in putting you in the same space, not the same room, same space.
I
Yeah.
have a question about, I mean, imagining such a large group, this notion of responsibility you take on, and how much do you feel responsible for the group or for yourself, or and in the decision making upon which projects you take? Because I realized that already 5 or 6 people, it's hard to manage that. And how much can you navigate within these different versions of responsibility yourself, and or at least for yourself, how much do you feel responsible and how much do you feel like you can give responsibility to others and stuff like that? I have had questions regarding that.
Okay. I guess it's really hard for most of the people to imagine how we can work. Even for ourselves, it's hard sometimes to see, oh, how are we still working, you know? But it's we don't work, we don't do artworks as collectives. That's, I guess, the main difference between us and most of the collectives. We are really an articulation. We help each other to take part of actions. So, for example, if last year, I guess, Travoa received an invite in our collective email to take part of museum action on something in Germany, I guess. The girls that took part of the action, the girls that took part, that went to the exhibitions, were the girls that took the initiative to organize the exhibition. So we curated ourselves with the ones that wanted to do it, you know? So I guess there was no more than 20. I really don't know. I didn't take part of this, for example, so I don't know how to say about this const action, for example. But it's almost all the time is like, who has the initiative to take part? You did, so you take part of it. You didn't see the message in the WhatsApp group, or you saw but you was like laying in your couch and didn't do anything to make this happen, so you won't take part of it. It's simple like that. And because what we want is like, since we don't have an owner, we don't have a president or anything, the things happens when people are doing it, you know. It's something like that.
Yeah.
That's such a good slogan, I think, in general, for art making, but for activism, for movements, for like you have to show up and you have to do the work, and then without that nothing will happen. Yeah, that's quite inspiring, and I think that also speaks to me in this, like as an individual in this collective, that sometimes you get excited by something, but you might not have the capacity to do it, or you're busy with something else, and that then we also like we work as ears and eyes for each other as well somehow. So I kind of relate to that, and we can pass on information, and then sometimes you ask someone specific, maybe that would actually be my question that I had, like, did the collective of collectives, or did this movement for you inspire your artistic practice as well? I mean, I know you underlined that you're not working creatively as a collective, but I still wonder in what way maybe your artistic practice has been influenced by this collectivity.
My collective actions as an individual, it happened at first in social movements. I took part of some social movements in life, and I guess since teenager. And so I know that my practice is very lonely. I work in my studio inside my house, painting things, but the things that I research are collective. Right now, for example, I'm researching my ancestry, my ancestors. So I have to create with my family and with the people I come from, the indigenous people I come from. And so I guess the inspiration I had for collective actions, I had all my life. Trovoa is one more. I guess Trovoa is one of the collectives that I had that was not really like about our daily problems and daily politics. You know, we deal more with access for racialized artists in the art circuit. So it's and for more than that, I guess my practice, aside from the studio, I always try to make art with communities. Recently, last year, I did a whole project that was real big. We traveled in my state into the countryside. We stopped in traditional communities and did some workshops of art, and we created art together. I can likely share the link, I mean, for you to put in the description or something that you can see. We did an animation that was, which frames of the animations were done by each collective, each community, I mean, that I worked with. Each community did a large mural. I'm also a graffiti artist, so I work a lot with street art. And those murals were like the key frame for the animation that I did after. So the result was like a GIF, and you know, it's a really small animation that was made collectively. But again, that's my practice. Trovoa in general, I can't say because it's really big, but we all are concerned about collectives because without the collectivity, most of our artists maybe would be like unknown, you know, until nowadays. And I'd like to get back a question for you, Feud. How many of you are?
How many we are?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a little bit, it's also different ways of counting the field in a way. There is 6 people that work on a regular basis, and even within our 6, within those 6, it fluctuates who is involved how much. And then for certain performances or events, we invite people to join, or we get invited as the field to join. So then the group expands. There's performances that we did where we were maybe up to like 20 in the team. And then there's shows where even in the field, we split up and only 2 people work on a project. So I would say it's like 6 is the core group. And then there's also the support from Tanzhaus, which sometimes I would count as another member in a way, like the building and the people that work at Tanzhaus that also have a say in the collective in certain moments. So yeah, there's physical bodies, and then there's the spatial body that is also maybe sometimes has a say. Yeah.
Thank you. And I know we're coming to an end of our entire session, so I do want to allow anyone who has a question to ask that question. Omar, our dear friend in Beirut, has had to leave, but any of the other panel members, if you would like to come back, and if anyone in the space has a question, please do feel free to ask. You can also send me your question and I can ask on your behalf. Oh yes, thank you for putting the link in. Thank you, Yana. Yes. Maybe you have questions for each other. I know that there's so much that we've just started to talk about, and we could be here probably for the entire festival. But I think Katia and Cecile and Stefan have a lot of things programmed for the next few days. So any questions? If not,
yeah, I'd like to ask the few if you have racialized people in your group, and how was their insertion and how they feel about their participations.
So the initial idea of the field was actually conceptualized by Marisa Godoy, who's a Brazilian artist, actually born and raised and grew up in Brazil and moved to Zurich or to Switzerland, I guess, over 20 years ago. And as Declan also mentioned earlier, we were like selected in an audition process. So it's a very special time and scenario to be confronted with us here in this setup being white and able-bodied, and at the same time like wanting to challenge that as well. So we do that by organizing formats, as I mentioned earlier, the Dance for Parkinson's class, or we organized a community dance piece for people that also non-professional dancers, where there were people over 80 part of the dancers. So we kind of like try to constantly challenge the notion of who is part of the field and who is the field, and finding ways of inviting different realities into the group. Yeah, that would be my reaction to that.
thank you. So our time is coming to an end. In honor, in trying to respect, care, and repair for our bodies and for the work that we do, I want to respect our time as well. And so thank you everyone for coming, for sitting, for joining, for being in the space with us, and also to all of the individuals who shared. But for those of you that have sent me questions or comments, we will be sharing the links with everyone after. So I'm sure that Cecile, and for everyone who has joined and signed up, you'll receive the links to all of the individuals who spoke today. Yes, thank you everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and may you have a really beautiful day, rest of the day or evening, or morning.
Thank you, Rosa, for your lovely moderation.
Oh, thank you.
Facilitation.
Thank you all. Bye bye, Ergao. Bye bye. Bye bye, Avni. Bye bye. Bye bye, Yana. Thank you, everyone.